Today's guest is David Hemmat. David is the founder and CEO at Blue Coding, a software development firm focused on nearshore development in Latin America. Very interested to hear about that as a developer history myself. He started his career as a telecom engineer, then he transitioned into software development and later became an entrepreneur. Aside from running Blue Coding, David also teaches innovation for entrepreneurship at Barna Management School, where he got his MBA. And in his free time, he does motorcycles and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I can't wait to hear all about you, David. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeremy. Really excited.
So for those who have never had a chance to meet you, get to know you, talk about your background, where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
Well, this is a tough one. My dad's from Iran. My mom's from the US. My grandparents on my mom's side moved to Venezuela when she was like 3 years old, and so she grew up there. I was born in Venezuela. I'm 33 now, so this was a bit ago. And I grew up there, and I lived there until I was 17. I did my high school there, and then I moved to Dominican Republic with my family. So my family belongs to a religion called the Baha'i Faith, and they wanted to come here and support the religion. And so I was 17, and so I, tagged along. And then at that point, I kind of had to make a choice as to what I was going to do with my life. I was fresh out of high school. I had some interest in things related to computers. So my dad owned a computer a hardware store, actually. So he sold hardware. And so I had been playing with computers since I was a kid, putting them together and breaking them apart. And we always had crappy computers at home. I can't explain why. It's just how it goes. If you sell something, then you have the crappy one yourself. But I really enjoyed that. And then I also had an uncle who was into science, quote unquote. And so what that meant was he was just a couple years older than me. I guess he was maybe 4 years older than me or something like that. And every time he'd come over in the summer, we'd, play with all sorts of dangerous things and electricity and fire and so on. And so I was interested in science and technology in general. And so when I was in Venezuela, I had decided I was going to do electrical engineering. I actually had 3 interests, right? So one was computer science, one was electrical engineering, and one was aviation.
Ooh.
And so aviation was like, well, I'm not going to do that because you kind of have to go into the military for that. In Venezuela, it didn't sound like a fun idea, right? And so I was like, well, computer science or electrical engineering. Picked electrical engineering. Then I ended up moving to the DR. And I went and I signed up for telecommunications engineering. I had no idea what that was, but it sounded cool. And so that's kind of what I did. I studied telecom engineering for years. It turns out I was okay at math. So I did really well there. And I had always had kind of a like for entrepreneurship. And so when I was a kid, for example, whenever I wanted to buy something, my parents generally wouldn't just give me the thing. They'd be like, okay, well, you have to work for it, go wash the car or do something, make a couple dollars. And I think my first business that I remember was I took the vacuum cleaner in my house and I went to the neighbors and I offered to vacuum their homes. And so I made a couple dollars. But then when I was in college, I started to do some kind of, I wanted to start some businesses. And so I tried doing, freelance web development, and that didn't work out so well. I did a couple sites, but you're not very good at it. And the clients aren't very good either. And then I started my first kind of real business. And this was an interesting one. So back then, this was, I want to say maybe 15, 20, yeah, a little bit more than 15 years ago. They had these LED billboards that were popular. Do you remember those?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're not so popular anymore, I think, but they were really popular. And so I saw the first one, and I called up the company. The sign had like a little phone number underneath, and I called them up and I asked, hey, I want to put up an ad there. What does it cost? And they gave me a number, and I was like, whoa, I can be rich. I don't remember what the number was they gave me, but I said, well, these ads are about 15 seconds long. I can display them this many times a day, and I'm going to be a millionaire. And so I went to a couple of friends and I convinced them each to pony up $15,000 somehow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we could buy one of these in China and have it shipped on a boat here and put it together. Um, and so I also somehow convinced my dad to sell the family car and donate some of that money to me. And I think I spent some student loan money that I wasn't supposed to spend on that. Anyways, I found the 15 grand, put it together. We wired $30,000 to some person in China, and we actually got a screen about 60 days later.
Wow.
Yeah, that could have gone all sorts of wrong just just until then. And then so at this point we're like, okay, so the screen arrived, and now what? And when I'm saying a screen, what this was a 1 meter by 1 meter blocks. They're about 120 pounds each, and we had 24 of them, right? And so it's a huge thing, and we had a place that we had found then, so we went and rented this spot on top of a building. And we went to a proper construction company and said, hey, we want to build a, kind of a structure around this so that we can put the screen up. And they gave us a number, and the number wasn't even that high. I remember it was like 10 grand or something, but we didn't have it at the time. And so like, no, we're gonna go figure it out ourselves. And so we went and we found a welder or something. And he's like, sure, I'll do it. And so he put together this terrible structure, and we looked at it and we're like, this is not going to last. And so we ourselves, we had it, we were like, okay, add a piece of metal here, put another pipe here, let's reinforce it. The thing's still on top of a building. So it seems to have worked. We got a notice from the county saying we, of course, couldn't build that without a permit. It was already halfway built. And so we went and negotiated with the county. And anyways, we set this up and it started working. And then it turns out you actually need like a salesperson and marketing and all sorts of things that we had no experience in. And so the business didn't go very well, but I learned a lot. And we ended up somehow selling this at a small loss to somebody who owned a couple other screens and some other media things. And so that was my first kind of real business, and it was a failure that could have been a lot worse.
It's fascinating though, because you got a chance to, that's cool technology, right? 120-pound brick of screen that
Yeah,
you
exactly.
like Lego block together.
And the way it works is basically these bricks, they just have like 4 holes in the back, right? And so you put up some some pipes, and then you just drill them through, and yeah, just put one on top of the other.
Wow.
On top of a 3 or 4 story building, and somehow this is allowed.
Right.
Anyways, did that. Then I finished college, and I got married right after finishing college. And so then I needed money and I needed a job, and first job I got didn't make a lot of money. My first job, I studied telecom engineering, but my first job was in software. The city I lived in at the time, second city in the Dominican Republic, didn't have a lot of big tech firms, and the telecom firms weren't there. They were in the capital. But I found a job in software engineering, and I had taken a couple programming courses, and so I figured I could do it. Started doing that. I was fired after 3 months for not being a good culture fit.
Oh no.
And then I went on to another job that was a lot more strict. I kind of learned some work discipline, and had to be there on time in the mornings and actually get things done. But on the side, first I started doing some more freelance work to kind of supplement my income. And then I ended up getting a part-time job as a freelance software engineer for a firm in the US. And for about 6 months, I had 2 jobs. And so I had, an 8 to 5 or something like that. And then I'd go home and I'd work from 8 to 12. And it was exhausting.
Wow. Yeah.
It was exhausting. I didn't have any energy for anything else. But at the end of that period, it seems like I had done pretty well, and they offered me a full-time job at this freelance place. It was a contract job, and so I figured that with the money I was making with the contract work, I could work a couple months and then just have a piggy bank for if my contract ended or something like that. Took that job. Did that for a year actually before that contract ended, and in that time I started blue coding. So I don't know if you want to get into that right away or.
Yeah, let's do it. So, I mean, what was the motivation behind starting? It just because I know it's not exactly freelance coding, right? It's more so finding people for people.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I think the thing was, I was working for a company in the US, and at this time I was making like $10 an hour, which was a lot of money for me. Um, it wasn't a lot of money for anybody else, but I was 22 or something, living in a little island in the Caribbean. But it was a lot more than I was making locally, right? And so kind of my thinking was, hey, you know what? I actually have a bunch of friends who are really good coders, or better than me, and I can probably find them some jobs. Um, and so I went on Reddit actually, and I kind of wrote a post that said, hey, I'm starting a business and I can find you coders in the Dominican Republic. And somebody wrote to me and he's like, hey, I want to hire somebody. So I called a friend, Alex, and I said, Alex, do you want a part-time job in the evenings? I'll pay you, I don't remember what it was, $12 an hour or something. And then I charged the client 18 and I made a margin on that.
Sure.
And that's kind of how it started. Now as to why, I can't say. I think that, the I kind of had a passion for business. The way I think about it is when I was a kid, I really enjoyed playing with Legos. And the reason was it was about building things, You have a bunch of pieces and you put them together and suddenly you have this cool thing. And I think the same way about business. It's exciting for me, it's fun for me because it's like, well, there's a bunch of pieces and there's a big problem that we need to solve, and how do we put them together? So that's kind of what I enjoy. And so I always wanted to do business things, and this one just kind of stuck. And it's grown quite a bit. We have about 100 and I don't know, I want to say we have like 120 people right now, probably a little bit more.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of how
Yeah,
it started.
that's pretty good. 120. And are you in I mean multiple countries? How does that, because it does say Latin America,
Yes.
so how does that work?
Yeah. So first people I hired were in the Dominican Republic. Um, Dominican Republic is not that big of an island. It has a population of 10 million. And eventually somebody asked me for something I couldn't find here, and I went and hired somebody, I don't remember, in Brazil probably. And then it expanded. And so right now our team of 120 is about in 15 countries. We have a couple folks in the US and Canada, a few people in Mexico, Costa Rica, Brazil, Colombia, all the way down to Argentina.
Wow.
And for a while, like uh, I felt like for a business to be real, you had to have an office. I don't know if you remember those times when that
Yeah.
was a
Before
thing.
pre-COVID.
Right. And then plus the imposter syndrome, right? Because I'm like a kid that says he has a business, and so so I needed like an office space, and so we had a one little tiny office that I shared with someone that turned into an office that we rented on our own, and then it turned into two office spaces, and eventually we had rented like a three-story house, and I had a team of about 20 there. And this was pre-COVID. We had about 40 people total, of which 20 were in the same city I was in the DR, and then the other 20 were abroad somewhere. After the pandemic, or during the pandemic, we just said, hey, everybody go home, take your computers and your desks and your chairs. And then suddenly we said, well, let's just start hiring anywhere. There's no real reason why we need to hire in the specific city. And right around that time, we were really starting to grow and we were needing talent. And so part of that process was I've kind of made it up along the way, I don't but now it's time for us to have grown-ups come in and tell us how things are actually done. Um, so we need to hire somebody with experience in sales and somebody with experience in recruitment and so on. And a lot of those people we found in different places.
Okay.
Um, and so yeah, now the team's completely remote. I haven't been in an office in 3 years or so. And you were telling me earlier that you kind of started the podcast because as a pandemic project. And I remember, right around that time, I had just I was getting divorced, so I was alone, and it was me and the cat. And it was like I'm in an apartment and I'm used to seeing people every day. What am I gonna do? Turns out I'm fine with it. I'm happy to be locked in the house all day.
Well, I think we've realized I think video calls really took off right over COVID, right? I mean, we had
Yeah.
FaceTime and Google Meet and a couple other things before COVID, but the acceptability as a means of communication, I think it's skyrocketed during COVID.
That's an interesting thing. We already did remote work. Like, and I had already worked remotely, but somehow I felt like I needed to have my team in person, you know?
Right.
Um, and then I guess it was just a matter of accepting that like the trade-off was we get to hire much better people than we could otherwise. And well, we, can't hang out with them in the kitchen. That's it.
Right. Well, you save some real estate costs.
Yeah, yeah, for
Right,
sure,
which
for
is
sure.
always a great business. I mean, there are a lot of companies I know here in the DC area who made those decisions during COVID of relinquishing business, their office space, or shrinking down to a smaller space for entertaining when they need to entertain a client or whatever. But instead of having full space, I think there is slowly a reverse going back into play here in where I live in the DC area, because
Yeah.
some companies, it's like you said, that office is a bit of a status thing.
Right, and well, they already invested in the real estate often, right? So,
Right.
but right around that time, I felt like I had made it, and by made it, I mean like this is a real business and it still exists, and we're almost 10 years in. Um, but at that point, I was like, okay, I don't need the office anymore. Like, I don't need to see it to feel like this is a real thing. It's a real thing already. The office can go away. But just we still meet in person sometimes, right? For at least for like certain management meetings and so on. And it's because the interaction is different, you know. There's something about being in person that helps build trust. And the thing is, you don't really get to have this type of conversations with your coworkers all that often because everybody's busy. They want to get, whatever, what do we have to decide? Okay, we're done. I'm going to go do my work now or
Right.
spend time with my family.
Yeah, or billable hours, right, for the client, make sure you're
Yeah.
getting stuff done. So that brings up for me. So the people who work for you are all working for a variety of different clients, helping them with their
Um,
projects.
So some of them are. So we have if we think about the team, say there's 120 people. I don't know the exact number. It kind of grows and shrinks over time, but of those, probably 20 or 30 are what I consider kind of the admin team, right? And so that's your recruitment team. We have about a recruitment team of 8 or 10 people. That's our HR, our finance, our sales and marketing, and so on, right? Then we have a team of 25 or so that are an engineering team that does our custom development projects. And so some clients will come to us and say, hey, I want to build a product. I can't manage an engineering team. Can you build it for me or maintain it for me? And then the other half of the team is developers who are working directly with our clients. And some of them are a lot more involved with our team. Some of them really don't want to be, and that's okay. You know, they just want to get their work done and send us an invoice and say hi every once in a while on Slack. So that's kind of the distribution we have.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, do you um to build? How do you build company community like that?
Yeah, it's tough. So we're actually still trying things, right? So during the pandemic, we tried all sorts of things. We had a weekly some sort of activity, right? So on Fridays we would have like a Netflix party. There was this little Chrome extension. I don't know if you remember. It was called Netflix Party, and you
Yep.
clicked on it, and everybody played the same movie at once. We had a period where, do you remember a video game called Among Us?
Oh, I love that game. Yeah.
Okay, Among Us was really popular, and we had like an Among Us league within the team, and everybody's free to join. We found some people don't want to be involved in that stuff. You know, they just want to get their work done and then go spend time with their families or their friends, and that's okay. Like we learned to accept that there will be different levels of involvement in the community or in the company. But a lot of things are also spontaneous. Like we have one team member who will every couple of weeks or so post a trivia question on Slack and be like, I have a $25 gift card for anybody who answers this.
Wow.
And that will really get everybody engaged, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it is spontaneous stuff. A lot of it and jokes, people will Photoshop me onto things and put it in a presentation. And So all of that stuff is actually encouraged because it kind of builds that sense of togetherness. When we have the opportunity, we like to see each other in person. So sometimes I'll travel somewhere. I went to Brazil for a wedding last year, and I called up, some of the folks that lived in the cities I visited. And I was like, hey, let's go out, let's have some dinner, let's spend some time together. And it was nice. We had to get together. It was an evening, but then you really feel like you know these people more personally. And oftentimes it's people that you don't directly work with, but that in one way or another they're in the organization, but now you actually know them in person, and so that's really nice. So the answer is it's evolving. We're trying to figure it out. We there's some things that you can do online, and then there's some things that you can't, and you just kind of accept that social aspect of people's lives is not going to be at work. It's going to be somewhere else.
Sure, but I love it because you've kind of settled into this acceptability of what a true hybrid environment might look like, where when necessary, your management meetings are in person, have meaningful interaction, right, where you can see each other in the eye and
Yeah.
have some of those conversations about direction and strategy. But like you said, when you get an opportunity to do the social stuff really is powerful.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I
It
remember
is.
before COVID, I used to host in the office I worked in. I used to host a lunchtime once a week, a lunchtime game. We
Hmm.
play something like Catan, or it's all we need to do is get scrape together, 4 people, or if it got bigger than that, we'd bring in a game that could support more than that, right? And it was the same reason, right? Let's find a way to do meaningful interaction where it's not just us griping at each other about some work related task that we're trying to get done. Let's blow off some steam, right? Make fun of each other in a game context, and it actually builds the esprit de corps and a good working relationship.
Yeah, and oftentimes you have people that will run into conflicts for work reasons, right? Our work is conflicting in one way or another. You need one thing, I need another thing, and that kind of creates a tense situation. And when people meet in person or just have an opportunity even to talk, it's just hard to get people who don't know each other on a Zoom call to talk to each other. I'll
Right.
tell you something about that in a moment. But when you get them together, suddenly they're like, okay, this person's it's okay, I guess, we can get
Right.
along. They're not that terrible. We had a Slack extension called Donut Call, or I don't remember if it's Donut. I think it's called Donut now, and it just pairs you with a random person every week. And it's like, here, you're paired with so and so. Pick a time to meet, and you just meet for 30 minutes and have a conversation about life.
That's a great
Um,
idea. Yeah, that's a great
yeah.
idea. Have you ever? I worked for a coding team once where we were remote, and once a week we just hung out in an online room together, like for
Mm,
like a 2 or 3 hour block. We're all independently working on our projects, but now you build that over the cubicle wall opportunity, right? And when you work in an office and you're in cubicles and you get stuck on something, you could say over the wall, "Hey, Sarah, do you know the answer to this problem I have right now?"
mm.
Right? You don't get that necessarily when you're all in your own basement, but we did that kind of hybridly once a week, where we're just kind of hanging out in this chat room or this video call, and then we could just do shout outs and say, "Hey."
I think we tried that before the pandemic, actually, when we were starting to have some remote people. And we did it for a bit, and then it kind of didn't stick. But now that you mention it, we do have, so once a month, I host something I call a devotional gathering. And what I told everybody is, look, you're all invited. Nobody has to come. It's on Fridays at midday, so it's like a time that's kind of not inconvenient for anybody. But we're gonna get together for an hour, and you can share a poem. You can tell somebody about something you're facing that's tough,
Mm.
and everybody is there to listen. And if you want advice, we'll give it. If you just want to talk, you can do it. And it's really nice. Like every time I'll do it once a month, and we always have, 8, 10 people, and people oftentimes join and they won't turn their cameras on, but they'll just listen in. And then some people really love it and they'll join and just talk about their lives and something they're going through. And kind of, it's a weird space in the sense that it's not traditional. It's not serving any specific business purpose, but people seem to enjoy just being able to get on a call to talk about life stuff and complain about, whatever issue they're having, or about how difficult it is with a certain thing that they're facing. Yeah, and it has created kind of that sense of we're kind of in this together.
Right. Well, I mean, those are all conversations you'd have around the water cooler
Right.
if you went to
That's right.
lunch together, right? And I love that. You create a space for that same kind of capability to happen
Yeah.
and then just see what happens. That's
You
nice.
know, I and this is kind of the concept with our management meeting too. We were just planning the next one. It's going to be in Mexico City. Because we have a team member in Mexico City who can't leave for health reasons right now, and so we're like, okay, let's go there. And we were talking about how many days it should be, and we said, well, generally we'll do Wednesday, Thursday meeting, then Friday and Friday is kind of half day meeting if we need it, and then Saturday is for fun, right?
Right.
And somebody said, well, I don't know that we have that much to discuss because we've been talking so much. But it doesn't really matter. Like what really matters is spending time together. Um, the business conversation is a plus.
Hmm.
So
That's great. So as you've gone through your career, you've done a bunch of different things, tried some stuff,
yeah,
started a company.
not very good at any of them, by the way.
Hey, yeah, we
I
all
just
stumble.
gotten lucky with some.
Yeah, we take that. We take that. So, what's something you've witnessed though that you said, if I had the power to change it, like to make the industry do something different, right? It could be the way we hire. It could be
Yeah.
you've done a lot in work flexibility already, right? But there are a lot of things as you've gone through your career you may have seen that you wish, man, I really wish we did that slightly different. What might that be for you?
Yeah. I think it's just about being kind to people.
Mm,
And so uh this is a company that I started. I had no idea how to do it. I kind of figured out along the way for the first couple of years. Then I had other smarter people than me who kind of guided me in the right direction. But one of the kind of the core things that we've been able to keep is just being nice to each other. And when I mean nice to each other, it's look, we don't always have to maximize profits. Yes, we're a business. Yes, we don't want to lose money. We want to make some, right? But we can do nice things for team members. We can help them out when they're in trouble. And we can, in general, give people second chances when they need them. And that has really made a difference in our organization. We have a lot of people here that say this is either the best job that they've had and they really love it, or it's one of the best. And that means a lot to me.
mhm.
We're not a company that can pay, the best salaries. We're not large enough for that. We're in this weird spot, actually. We're small, but almost mid-sized. And so we kind of have to scrape together what we can to hire good people, but people stay here because of the environment and what the work culture is like and what the people are like, really. And I think that it's not that difficult to do, you know. Um, it's just a mentality switch around, look, we can both win, we can all win. I don't have to screw everybody else over to get ahead. And that really, really makes a difference in both what type of people you can hire. Like we can hire really high quality people for less money because because we're a nice place to work.
Right.
It impacts how long people will stay and it impacts how happy they are. So I think it's just that. That's the one I'd put on the table.
Yeah, I love it. And you're right. In my long career, I've worked a lot of places, and be kind is not something I hear a lot
Yeah,
at
yeah.
most businesses. So I love that. What's next for you, or what's next for Blue Coating?
All right. So remember I told you that I one of the things I wanted to do when I was going to go to college was aviation. And so I actually did that last year and I got my pilot's license.
Nice,
And
congrats.
so then thank you. I was and now I'm like, okay, now I need to invite my friends to fly because otherwise I did this for nothing. So so I'll just ask people, hey, who wants to go for a flight? But I checked that off the list. And then the next thing for me personally is I want to take a motorcycle trip. At some
Ooh,
point, I got into motorcycling, and somebody from my team gave me a book, and it's a book called Two Wheels South: A Trip from Brooklyn to Argentina or something. And it's these two guys from Brooklyn who ride motorcycles all the way down to Argentina. So I received this book a couple years ago, and I said, "Ooh, that looks fun." And so right now is like just the time in my life where I'm able to do that. And so I'm planning to, if I am able to ship a motorcycle to Argentina in December, I'm going to start doing that. And
wow.
I intend to work through that. So I'm just gonna take a motorcycle and ride it all the way up to Alaska. Um, if you write to me in like a year or two, I'll let you know, how it went. Um, but I intend to travel on weekends and work during the day. And that's for me. That's kind of my next thing. For Blue Coating, we're at a very interesting spot. We're our small company that's we're, what do you call it? Punching above our weight in a certain sense. You know, we're competing against really big firms that are publicly funded, and we're winning those clients. And it's also a dangerous spot to be in. So we need to grow right out of that. We're hoping to, continue growing. One of the things on my plate is I need to make the company less and less dependent on me. And kind of right now we have a very good management team. There's still some things that depend on me. And so the next thing is going to be taking those final pieces and um, let's say institutionalizing them and making them so I can actually go on a motorcycle trip and company can continue. I think that's it.
All right. Well, that's fantastic. David, I'm excited for you. I'm excited for where you're at. I'm excited for where your company is at as well. I've been at companies that are right on that cusp of moving from, small to medium sized and then getting that big growth spurt that happens right about that time. So I'm
Yeah.
excited for you. And, if you drive through the DC area on your motorcycle, we'll have to catch some dinner or lunch or something.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I can keep you posted. At some point soon, I'll probably not be the right CEO for this company. So if you want to recommend anybody, I'm also, open to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's great catching up with you. And I look forward to seeing what's coming for you.
Likewise. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Have a good evening.